The following is a presentation of New Worker Radio. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily represent those of WZML, its staff, or management.
Hello, and welcome to New Worker News on WZML 92.9. My name is Manolis, bringing you national and international updates from a worker's perspective. To begin, here is Yanis with the local news.
Thank you, Manolis. It has been about 2 weeks since Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. Since then, the Democratic Party and the capitalists it represents have rallied around Kamala Harris. Although Harris has yet to be officially named the nominee, with so much capital behind her, her nomination is all but secured. Many in the party are hailing this as a historic moment, emphasizing Harris's race and gender. They point to the fact that Harris is a woman, or that she is of Indian and Jamaican American descent, as a way to market her as a fighter of the working class. Someone who will fight for the interests of the workers against the monopolies. But in reality, the opposite is true. Harris represents the interests of the monopolies who got her elected. During the 2020 election cycle, monopolies like Alphabet Incorporated, Walt Disney Company, AT&T Incorporated, Kaiser Permanente, and Comcast Corporation all donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to her campaign. When looked at by industry, Harris received $1.5 million from the capitalists in the entertainment industry, $2.4 million from those in education, $3 million from law firms, and another $1 million from those in securities and investments. Since the 2020 campaign, Harris's ties to the monopolies have only strengthened. It was reported by Harris's campaign that $310 million were raised just last month. Furthermore, a new super PAC called VCs for Kamala, or Venture Capitalists for Kamala, was founded by the founder of Graham & Walker, Leslie Feinzeg. Since the establishment of this PAC, several billionaires have signed on, pledging to vote for Kamala. It is obvious that finance capitalists are rallying behind Harris, which makes obvious how Harris was able to raise over $300 million in just a single month. Despite how obvious it is that Harris is in the pockets of the capitalist class, the Democratic Party has been working nonstop to generate this false image of Harris as a champion of the working class. Not only do her financial ties tell a different story, but her policies and actions betray her as an enemy of the working class. One of the most egregiously anti-worker positions of Harris is her continued support for Israel and its genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza. When Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, visited the White House earlier this week, the Biden administration, including Harris, welcomed the war criminal with open arms. Citing Israel's right to defend itself, Harris has been an unwavering supporter of Zionism, promoting and defending the U.S.'s continued financial and military support of Israel. Support which has directly led to the deaths of over 100,000 Palestinians, many of them women and children. During her time as a state attorney general, she defended the California prison system against allegations of mistreatment and overcrowding. This came after the high-profile death of an inmate due to the horrendous conditions of overcrowding in the state's prisons. The facts of the case being so damning that even the bourgeois courts were forced to rule the prison's overcrowding as unconstitutional and inhumane, ordering the state to reduce the prison population by 40,000. Kamala, in defending the prison system, argued that the state couldn't reduce the population by so much so quickly because the state relied on the inmates' labor. Lastly, she promoted a bill which targeted parents of students who were truant, with massive fines and even incarceration, a law which, to no one's surprise, disproportionately targeted working-class parents. Harris's anti-worker, pro-capitalist character is quite evident given the facts. This is why we cannot expect someone like her to ever truly side with the working class. As we have said before in other episodes, the money that is given to these politicians by the capitalist class is not given freely, but in fact, they come with many strings attached. This money is used to ensure that these politicians continue to promote the interest of capital. Whether Biden or Harris or some other Democratic Party member, no nominee which the Democratic Party puts forward will ever truly fight for the interests of the working class because that party like the Republican and like all other capitalist parties, are at their core parties of the wealthy. Such parties have never and will never be working class parties or vehicles for real change. The fact is that we as working class people are in desperate need of a true working class party, one which is not only not beholden to the capitalist, but is actively against them. A party that is staunchly anti-capitalist and thus fights for the interests of the working people, unwaveringly. Such a party can only be the Communist Party, but with the ideological and organizational degeneration of the historical party in our country, the CPUSA, and with all other so-called communist and socialist parties being under the influence of one or another opportunist trend, we are left in a grave situation where there is no Communist Party. Understanding that only the Communist Party can be the vehicle for revolution, for real permanent gains by the working class, we of the Communist Workers' Platform have taken up the vital cause of building the party. We will rebuild, we will fight, and we will win a new world. The oppressors have their parties. They even have their candidates in Harris and Trump, but we are left without both. We need our own party, our own candidates. We need the Communist Party now.
We'll be right back with more of New Worker News here on 92.9 FM WZML. But I want to remind you that every day throughout this country, workers are subjected to injustices and humiliation at the hands of the capitalists, from unpaid wages to mass layoffs. So we at New Worker understand the tyranny that the workplace is for workers. This is why we fight to expose these injustices. Only through militant organization of the working class can we stand toe-to-toe against the bosses. So this is why we want to hear from you, the listener. Are you having issues at work? Bosses cutting your hours or wages? Are you or your fellow workers' safety being thrown out of the window in the name of ever-increasing profit? Well, you are not alone. So reach out to us to tell your story. You can anonymously send an email or even a voice memo to cwpusa@protonmail.com. Again, that is cwpusa@protonmail.com. And check us out online at newworker.us. And now back to New Worker Radio, only here on 92.9 FM WZML.
First in national news, we discuss the communist movement in the United States, which continues in a grave state without the presence of a true communist party. The recent crisis that has been brewing within the Communist Party of the USA, known as the CPUSA, following its 32nd National Convention, spawned a new so-called Communist Party, which is just an outfit of those who seek to slander and dirty the role of the communists. On July 21st, 2024, several communist internet personalities gathered in Chicago to form the American Communist Party. Among its prominent members are the Midwestern Marx Institute, Jackson Hinkle, the prominent MAGA communist, Christopher Hillary, former International Secretary of the Party of Communist USA. The founding declaration includes signatures from 29 clubs of the Communist Party of the USA, as well as 3 other clubs of what is known as the Party of Communist USA, Peace USA. However, many have since denied affiliation with this American Communist Party on social media. The American Communist Party justified including these signatures based on a petition they signed against Resolution 5 of the 32nd CPUSA National Convention, which formalized the CPUSA's long-standing alignment with the Democratic Party. Within days, ACP, American Communist Party leaders, appeared on Russia Today and the Jimmy Dore Show to promote their new formation, quickly amassing tens of thousands of followers on X, formerly Twitter. Their sudden rise in popularity is the culmination of what is known as CPUSA 2036 initiative, which was launched by the prominent MAGA communist streamer known as Haz in 2021. He runs what is known as Infrared. His supporters were encouraged to infiltrate the CPUSA, detach it from the Democratic Party, and so-called restore its former glory. To be sure, the ACP declaration highlights significant issues within the CPUSA, namely, the failure to address the struggles of the working class in the United States, the lack of democratic centralism, the dissolution of its publishing arm and its ideological journal, the transfer of the party archives to New York University, and their alignment with the Democratic Party.
However, the validity of these observations does not negate the fact that the American Communist Party constitutes yet another complete deviation from Marxism-Leninism. This new party is a thoroughly petty bourgeois formation led by streamers, can also be categorized as small businessmen, political grifters, and ex-functionaries of the state, and embodying some of the most disturbing and harmful tendencies that obstruct the reconstitution of the Communist Party in our country. These tendencies include careerism, individualism, over-reliance on online forms of recruitment and organization, pandering to the most backward sections of society, promoting and condoning reactionary and alienating positions, and supporting outright anti-communist leaders like the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, and Vladimir Putin, president of Russia. These tendencies should all come as no surprise, as the ACP's leaders in the so-called plenary committee all have a petty bourgeois background as social media influencers and content creators. Moreover, Jackson Hinkle and the Infrared Collective are both specifically known for their embrace of fascist in what is known as third and fourth position ideologues such as Alexander Dugin, James Parazzo, the American Front and now New Resistance leader, and also Rafael Machado of New Resistance Brazil. The American Communist Party joins the likes of the deeply anti-communist and opportunist World Anti-Imperialist Platform as another fundamentally reformist and revisionist group championing what is known as the theory of multipolarity. Rather than fighting for revolution, its true aim is thus to subjugate the workers and people of our country to sections of the bourgeoisie in the United States that are supposedly interested in the revival of national production, and the bourgeoisie of other countries, especially those of the BRICS countries. To that end, these swindlers try to co-opt the rhetoric of Donald Trump of bringing jobs back to America and the ideological guise of the Eurasian imperialist bloc, who try to say that they defend traditional values. The American Communist Party, so-called mask of patriotic socialism, is designed to appeal to the Republican Party base in the United States as a supposed bulwark of the working class. They try to hark back to the days of Browder and the Popular Front and draw on modern and historical U.S. symbols and traditions with slogans like "Communism is 21st century Americanism." The Midwestern Marx Institute, now dovetailing with the voices of MAGA communism, has played a significant role in developing this ideological and political framework, attempting to give socialist content a national form. In other words, socialism with American characteristics. This approach repeats past errors while systematically obscuring the motives of the bourgeoisie and distorting reality. It tries to present conservatism and the reactionary turn of capital as progress. However, it has also proven effective in influencing the youth who often lack historical knowledge and class experience. The reference to what is known as socialism with Chinese characteristics is no coincidence. In a recent interview with Jimmy Dore, discussing the founding of the American Communist Party, Jackson Hinkle confirmed that, quote, "The way that a communist country operates, at least when it comes to the economic aspect, is much similar to how we are witnessing China operate today." Such a characterization contradicts the Marxist understanding of the fundamental character of capitalism, which is the private appropriation of social production, that is capitalism, versus that of socialism, which is the social production for society's needs. Hinkle further states that, quote, "Russia is basically rebuilding this multipolar world. Even though Putin does not call himself a communist, he basically is taking up the mantle and waving the flag at this point." Both statements demonstrates the American Communist Party's rejection of scientific communism, which stands for the unyielding fight for the emancipation of the working class from the bourgeoisie of every country in favor of aligning the people with the imperialist BRICS alliance. In the same interview, Hinkle never once mentions the necessity of the socialist revolution. Instead, he regurgitates the old, tired plan of using the state to nationalize industries. Socialism is thus to be built within the framework of capitalist society, as enshrined in a bourgeois constitution that guarantees private property and a Bill of Rights whose freedoms extend only as far as one's capital. The banner of multipolarity does not belong to the communists. The slogan for a multipolar world is a continuation of imperialism through a new division of markets, labor forces, and raw materials. Exchanging one imperialist center for another is no exchange at all. Multipolarity is the slogan of social democracy. It is a slogan of the so-called progressivist currents, and ultimately, it is reaction masquerading as revolution. It is the banner of which imperialist alliances will lead the global capitalist system and by extension the inter-imperialist war. Aligning with the state forces of Russia and China is a betrayal of proletarian internationalism. It means choosing the side of one or the other imperialist poles in the ever-intensifying competition for dominance within the imperialist system. Today, that competition takes the form of the US, NATO, EU alliance versus that of the China-Russia alliance. In this sense, the American Communist Party is no different from the social democratic parties of the Second International that chose to side with their bourgeoisie. The consequences of this alignment will also be the same: the disorientation of the working class and the obstruction of the path to socialist revolution, leaving the people unprepared for the looming threat of a renewed world war. Further, it is important that we are wary of any organization that it claims itself as the Communist Party, especially one helmed by online personalities and with no connection to the working masses. Such a claim, born out of blatant megalomania and overestimated support, can only lead to further confusion within an already fractured revolutionary movement. The title of the Communist Party is not something that one can pin on oneself. For Marxist-Leninists, the Communist Party is the fighting cadre organization of the working class, led by a revolutionary program based on the principle of democratic centralism. The ACP, the American Communist Party that is, offers no such program, and the apparent lack of an election to their so-called plenary committee calls into question their claims to uphold democratic centralism. Since the counter-revolution in the Soviet Union, an ideological political crisis has ravaged the international communist movement. With no leading center to unite the revolutionary forces of the world, opportunist and revisionist ideology has come to dominate the movement, particularly in the United States. All of this has led to the rise of many organizations claiming themselves as a true champion of the working class in the fight for socialism-communism. Among them are the CPUSA and the Party of Communist USA, Peace USA. Neither organization can sidestep their joint responsibility for the development of the American Communist Party, for both have themselves become bastions of the same eclectic and opportunistic tendencies that present China and Russia as so-called anti-imperialist states. The Communist Party of the USA, of course, denies its responsibility for the creation of the American Communist Party, claiming it was birthed outside of its ranks. They mention nothing of the years spent cultivating the theories of multipolarity, market socialism, and other opportunistic trends within their ranks, or their relinquishing of the Leninist theory of the party in favor of the organizational standards of a social democratic party. But the truth is that the CPUSA, the Communist Party of the United States, has been a bankrupt vehicle of opportunism and an appendage of the bourgeois political system for decades. It has long tied itself to the Democratic Party in the name of so-called defeating fascism. It is only natural that this eclecticism and opportunism within its ranks would give rise to the abomination that is the American Communist Party. Thus, between the CPUSA, the Peace USA, and now the so-called American Communist Party, to say nothing of the myriad of other formations scattered across the country, none of them offer a revolutionary option for the workers and popular forces in the United States. However, there yet remains one alternative to this political scene. That is the Communist Workers' Platform, which is an organization dedicated to fighting in the streets, in our neighborhoods, in the schools, and crucially, in our workplaces for the reconstitution of the Communist Party in the United States. We don't simply dream of a better world. We work to construct it, to build up and organize the forces of the working class in preparation for its historic mission, the overthrow of the capitalist system. The bourgeoisie has its parties. It's time for ours, and we need it now. Join the Communist Workers' Platform. In other national news, 25 huge fire fronts are raging in California in an area of 1,489 square kilometers. This fire has come to be known as the Park Fire. Within 1 week, it has destroyed hundreds of thousands of acres of forest land, more than 100 buildings, while threatening another 4,200. In the same area, a huge fire broke out in 2018, resulting in the total destruction of the city of Paradise, the destruction of 11,000 homes, and the death of 85 people. 42-year-old Ronnie Dean Stout has been arrested on suspicion of arson, has a heavy criminal record, and it was decided to continue his detention without the possibility of release on payment of cash bail until his trial. The U.S. National Fire Center reported that as of Monday night, the 25 fire fronts were active and raging out of control, and that more than 25,000 firefighters and support personnel had been deployed to battle the flames. The 25 fires are estimated to have reduced to ashes an area of more than 8,288 square kilometers. This tragedy underscores the glaring inadequacy of the state apparatus. It highlights that the lives and basic needs of the people are not a priority of the bourgeois state. This is because it is a state based on the logic of capital, which ultimately serves the needs of a few business groups and not the majority. Our next story takes a deeper look at the upcoming elections. The pre-election campaign in the United States continues under heightened antagonisms, with the two bourgeois political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, looking for the support of sponsors. Vice President and presumptive Democratic nominee Kamala Harris is trying to fend off Trump's claims that she is against the interests of shale oil monopolies. She has assured she would not ban shale oil production, despite its dangers to underground aquifers. The shale method, which for some years has made the United States the first in the production of what is known as black gold internationally. Also, Harris particularly promotes the right to abortion up to 22 weeks of pregnancy. As far as donors are concerned, Harris's deputy director of her campaign confirmed that $200 million was raised in the first week, of which 66% came from new donors, while more than 170,000 new volunteers signed up. On the other hand, the Republican candidate and former U.S. President Donald Trump announced he will give an interview to FBI agents as part of the investigation into the assassination attempt against him on July 13th. The development comes after Trump strongly criticized the FBI's handling of the case, even calling for its director to resign. On Saturday, speaking at a cryptocurrency investor conference in Nashville, Tennessee, Trump claimed that, judging by the politics of outgoing President Biden, Kamala Harris is anti-cryptocurrency. He announced he would seek the establishment of a crypto-friendly Securities and Exchange Commission, a cryptocurrency advisory body, and would block any possible attempt by the Federal Reserve to create its own digital currency. Now we move on to international news, where we begin by diving into the topic of immense global importance, the Arctic zone and its evolving strategic significance. Recently, the United States Department of Defense made public the strategy for the Arctic 2024, highlighting the critical role this region plays in international dynamics and intensifying rivalries. With the recent NATO enlargement, including Finland and Sweden, 7 of the 8 states that hold territories in the Arctic are now NATO members: Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the United States. The only non-NATO Arctic country, Russia. The American strategy underscores the climate change is rapidly reshaping the Arctic, which is warming more than 3 times faster than the rest of the world. By 2030, we might witness the first practically ice-free Arctic summer. This loss of sea ice will increase the viability of Arctic sea lanes and access to undersea resources, enhancing the region's military and economic value. The U.S. Pentagon's document highlights the Barents Sea, off the northern coasts of Russia and Norway, and the Bering Strait, separating the Russian Far East from Alaska as critical sea crossing points that are becoming more navigable and increasingly important from an economic and military standpoint. Concerns are raised about the capabilities and ambitions of Russia and China. Although China is not an Arctic nation, it seeks to influence the growing dynamics in the Arctic to gain more access and exploit its resources. China prioritizes the development of its operational expertise in the Arctic, conducting dual civilian and military research with its icebreakers. Chinese warships have demonstrated the ability and intent to operate in and around the Arctic, often in exercises with the Russian Navy. Beijing promotes the Arctic as a region of global commons and pursues investments in infrastructure and energy resources through what is known as its Polar Silk Road. Russia, with the largest territories in the Arctic and the most developed military presence, is another significant player. The Kola Peninsula houses the Russian Navy's Northern Fleet and significant nuclear forces. Despite some damage to its conventional ground forces from losses in Ukraine, Russia's strategic air and sea forces remain intact. This document notes that Russia could use its Arctic infrastructure to threaten U.S. power projection in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, and to assert excessive and illegal maritime claims along the Northern Sea Route, which is the shortest shipping route connecting Eurasia and the Asia-Pacific region. The strategy outlines several key goals for the United States and NATO planning in the near future: strengthening the capabilities of the joint force in the Arctic by modernizing equipment, engaging with allies and partners to enhance unified deterrence, and exercising Arctic presence to demonstrate interoperability and credible joint capabilities. The document emphasizes the readiness to support responses using any and all means necessary, including military confrontation, against Russia and China. Listeners, the Arctic is rapidly becoming a focal point for international strategic competition. As the ice melts, the stakes for a generalized war are rising. The reference to all means is not just a phrase. Along with all of the above, it indicates the further planning of strengthening of the United States and NATO military presence in the Arctic, as well as the preparation for a full military confrontation in the region by all means, including nuclear, against Russia and China. Next, we delve into the critical report highlighting the escalating global military strategies of the United States. The U.S. is gearing up for the possibility of simultaneous wars around the world, specifically targeting China and Russia. This move signals a significant increase in already massive military spending and a preparation for major war escalation in the coming years. In the context of ongoing conflicts, particularly the US-NATO-EU standoff with Russia and Ukraine, we witness extensive military exercises, essentially rehearsals for broader conflicts. Recent examples include Russian naval exercises involving nearly 300 ships and a joint Russian-Chinese naval exercise in the Gulf of Finland. Meanwhile, the United States continues testing new weapon systems, such as hypersonic weapons in Florida. A revealing report on the U.S. National Defense Strategy has emerged. Mandated by Congress, the Bipartisan Committee on National Defense Strategy calls for increased military spending above inflation rates to counter threats from Russia and China. The report underscores the need for the United States to be prepared for conflicts on multiple fronts. The report criticizes the current state of the U.S. defense industrial base, citing underinvestment, gaps in the workforce, and fragile supply chains. It highlights the inadequacy of the 2022 National Defense Strategy in addressing the very real threat of simultaneous conflicts in multiple theaters. The committee urges a revision of the U.S. military's operational guidance to better address global competition and coordination between Russia and China. It calls for a strategy capable of waging war on multiple fronts, clearly distinguishing this from the older two-war strategy, which envisions separate conflicts against less capable states like North Korea and Iran. According to the report, the U.S. armed forces must defend the homeland, deter China's territorial aggression in the Western Pacific, and if necessary, fight and win. It also stresses the importance of NATO's structure to prevent, and if needed, defeat Russian aggression, while addressing malign activities from Iran in the Middle East. The U.S. magazine, Foreign Policy, has highlighted internal contradictions within the U.S. regarding defense strategy priorities. Thomas Mankin, one of the report's authors, calls for preparation for war on three fronts. However, others, like Elbridge Colby, argue the U.S. military cannot effectively fight two wars and emphasize prioritizing Asia over Europe. The report acknowledges the limits of the United States resources and suggests setting military capability targets for European allies to reduce over-reliance on the United States. Despite a potential focus on China, it insists the United States must maintain a global presence to counter China's worldwide interests. The U.S. cannot face Russia, China, and their partners alone, the report stresses. Strengthening alliances and supporting their military, economic, diplomatic, and industrial efforts is crucial. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has announced the successful testing of hypersonic weapons in Florida, marking significant progress in developing operational ultrasound technology. This follows a mid-July test flight of hypersonic missiles from Hawaii. All of this combined with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken's visit to the Asia-Pacific region for the purpose of drastically upgrading U.S. presence in the region to further confront China, highlights that the drums of war are being beaten. His trips include visits to Laos, Vietnam, Japan, the Philippines, Singapore, and Mongolia. It is a signal that the Biden administration and its potential successor, Kamala, are all in on the well-known Obama-era strategy, pivot to Asia. Against this backdrop, the United States has also deployed naval forces in the wider Middle East, attempting to defend the killer state of Israel from the potential retaliation by Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah. The United States, Britain, and other so-called allies are increasing their diplomatic support to the murderous state of Israel, and all of this is intensifying, reaching new levels that show that we are on the brink of a generalized outbreak of a war. Thus, it is important, it is our duty that the people and the workers act urgently and decisively. But this is only possible with a political party, that is the Communist Party, which is rooted in the movement of the workers and people, targeting all the warmongering parties, as well as the capitalists and their international allies. This decaying system that gives rise to oppression and wars here in the United States, in the heart of the beast, we have the responsibility to pluck out its heart.
You've been listening to New Worker News on 92.9 FM WZML, your home for local, national, and international news, all from a working class perspective. New Worker News is the official organ of the Communist Workers Platform. If you're a worker, we would like to hear from you. You can reach us at cwpusa@protonmail.com. Again, that's cwpusa@protonmail.com. If you would like more news from a worker's point of view, visit us at newworker.us. You can find weekly articles on events happening all over the country and internationally. If you've enjoyed the program and wish to see more working class reporting, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/newworker. And thank you for listening to New Worker News on 92.9 FM WZML.